If you love rom-coms but want more queer rom-coms in your life, you should watch BL, especially Thai BL, because it's the best. Let's get into it. Hi friends, today it's all about my love for rom-coms. I grew up watching all the classic 80s, 90s, and then also early 2000 rom-coms, and so I really wanted to share this kind of love with my love for BLs, especially Thai BLs. And so that's why this whole video is just going to be really rom-com-coded, really about those vibes, those comfort vibes that we get. I'm so excited, and yeah, let's get into it. I'm so excited, yay! To say, as a child and teenager, I love watching like fairy tales and rom-coms with my family, especially my sister and my mother. And there's some of those classic comfort movies like The Holiday, Devil Wears Prada, 10 Things I Hate About You. You know, they give me like so much nostalgia slash comfort, even though I've watched them probably 20 to 40 times depending on the movie. And they just give you something, you know? And so as I grew up, like I was like, yes, this is giving me so much comfort, but I also wanted to have more representation, more diversity, especially queer representation. And yes, we're getting more and more in general, also here in Germany, in the Western world. And I love that. So great. But I have to say, in the last few years, really like Thai BL and in general BLs have really like enriched my life. And because they have so many similarities kind of to rom-coms, especially those kind of slice of life, you know, the typical Thai BLs, for example, the ones about university, where it's like the engineers and the architects, the engineers and the medicine students, like those are like some of the prominent, you know, Thai BL tropes. That's how it also kind of rose to fame. Of course, with things like Sodas, for example, or also Love by Chance, Love Sick, like there's some very rom-com-coded, you know, very quite a little bit cheesy maybe, a little nostalgia, a little like tacky maybe. I love it though. As for my favorite movies in my childhood was, or in teenage years, was The Holiday, which is also partly then about movies itself, because one of the side characters is like a filmmaker, writer, director. And I love that line that Ken Winslet said, which is like, I need corny, I look for corny in my life. And I feel like sometimes if something is corny or cheesy, it does not mean that it's bad. It just means that, you know, like maybe it has like the super high polished look or whatever, but I feel like sometimes that's also really comforting. And so like, yeah, I have to say there's so many like quite similarities between the rom-com and the Thai BL, especially like the way that it's structured, the way that there's like tropes and like in-jokes and like all of these like very like quiet like things which always are repeating, which are similar to the rom-com, which obviously a rom-com is romantic comedy, which has a certain like way of being like written, characters being written, behaving, and like certain storylines they're obviously developing. There's very romance centered, and that they, you know, the classic storyline basically. And so that's why I feel like I really wanted to get into that. Okay, so why do I think that Thai BLs especially are like so rom-com coded? Is because, especially if you look at the GMMTV ones, they have a lot of BLs over the last like 8 years basically. And there's so many of them which goes to a certain formula. And for example, like literally one of the markers of a GMMTV BL is that there's a guaranteed happy ending, which is the same with a rom-com, because if it's like a drama or something like that, you don't know if it's going to have a happy ending, but it's a rom-com, it should have a happy ending, right? Happily ever after. And I feel like that's what they do as well in GMMTV so well, is that they give us like that ending that we need, that we crave, always fitting to the story, but still a happy ending. And there's like, obviously there's these own tropes within either GMMTV or the Thai BL industry. For example, like obviously GMMTV is very famous for having like the cheesy sound effects, the couples who are branded couples, you know, so I feel like those are like their like their vibe. And so that's why I kind of do appreciate that, because then I kind of know what I'm getting into, because I love that. I love a bit of familiarity, because as we are humans in general, we do love our comfort and our security. And so I think it really has developed in Thai and especially in general, like it has developed their own tropes. For example, that like the engineering students, that's I feel like a very important trope is if there's an engineering student on screen, he will fall in love with another man, either another engineering student or some other student from the university, right? All starts with iconic shows like Sotos, for example, and where they're both two engineering students, which is also really heavily focused on that part of the like aspect of being in university as an engineering student. The community is like very interesting. I think also very like well done. And so then we have like the similar like things like in the rom-com, basically we have a meet cute, right? We have the inciting incident, we have a meet cute, we have the first kiss, right? We have miscommunications, we have other quite cheesy tropes, which are also often then also taken from soap operas, like when it's more of a dramedy maybe. So I do love that. But yeah, I have to say, it's like it goes to a certain extent very rom-com-y, because for example in Sotos, it's like they meet and there's like a tension, because one of them, right, is the hazer, the other one is like the freshman, but the freshman, he's like super feisty and he's like, I'm gonna make you my wife. I think that's the iconic line from Kong. And then Artit is like, oh my god. Gay panic. But then it's also like, yeah, they just keep meeting, because obviously they're in the same space, right? And there's all these things that happen that kind of force them together. And obviously then there's chasing, pursuing, grand gestures, first kiss, dramatic scenes, misunderstandings, and of course one of like a really also important trope in Thai BLs is episode 11, because a lot of Thai BLs have 12 episodes, and so in episode 11 most of the time something happens either at the end of episode 10, in the beginning of episode 11, that kind of destroys some of the progression that has happened in the show. Them being together, something happens, like with the parents, with the people around them, their friends, maybe an ex-girlfriend or something like that. Okay, and so that's why I think that's also really interesting. They have established their own tropes, like the engineering one, then the episode 11 one, then through Sotus and some other ones in the beginning, like Pink Milk, I think was also the like this like drink that Artit always drinks, and what became like this massive thing. And sometimes it's just like they kind of establish their own tropes, which I love that, because when I studied this, basically when I studied media in university, I always was fascinated by the idea of tropes, as it can be something bad, like the manic pixie dream girl trope or the born sexy yesterday trope, so like misogynistic or homophobic tropes. But it can also be something that gives you comfort, because it gives the story like kind of structure, and you kind of like can kind of categorize it, you know. And so I do love that. And then we have, of course, some of the iconic tropes even from before, like friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, like kind of like roommates to lovers, rivals to lovers, like all of those, which are also in iconic movies, like I said, 10 Things I Hate About You, or also something like You've Got Mail, When Harry Met Sally, My Best Friend's Wedding, Notting Hill. Like those are also really iconic rom-coms. And they are really using those tropes also really well, I have to say. And even though they're not as highly produced as some of those Hollywood movies, but it still gives me that same feeling where I'm like, yes, this is fun. Like I'm sitting in my bed, like eating my snacks and like having fun, you know, and giggling and kicking my feet basically. So yeah. Only in the last few years, there's been like this rise in queer media, series, movies, also rom-coms. But as I said before, there's still not as many as there's straight rom-coms. And often there's also still like, from some people, either in the, like, in general, like, who have to do with media are like, oh, but then when it's a queer film, like, has this all these expectations put upon it to be like perfect and like and stuff like that. And I'm like, have you seen some of those rom-coms? Like, I love them, but they're not perfect. They have toxic boyfriends, toxic stereotypes, you know, like unrealistic endings and all of that. And we love that, but it's that's why it's not reality. It's an escapism, right? And so I feel like queer people also definitely deserve to see themselves happy, but they're not also being like somewhat realistic, even though it sometimes also is that. But so that's why I also was like, I love that in Thai BL sometimes there's even that, you know, the queerness is not really like the thing that is making like the friction, the tension, or any of the kind of hurdles that the couple and the characters have to go through. Like, there's like, for example, Bad Buddy, where it's, their parents literally are saying they don't have any problem with them, especially Pran's parents in Bad Buddy is like, and we don't have a problem with you dating anyone of any different gender, right? You can date whoever you want, just as long as you don't date Pat, the boy from next door, because we hate that family. Which, you know, and so the whole reason from why there's a lot of things they have to overcome, why there's angst, why there is like tension, is because of the parents. They are basically in a pseudo Romeo and Juliet kind of feud, but without like any kind of guns or weapons. And so I'm like, that's so interesting, right? But then there's also like series which I do love them, like Love by Chance or like Moonlight Chicken, right? Where the coming out and the being queer and that kind of stuff and the societal pressures do appear and are maybe even part of the antagonistic forces and the things that are the hurdles for the couple, yes. But I would still consider Love by Chance somewhat of a rom-com as well. But it definitely has more of that realistic approach. But there's like so many, like My Love Mix-Up, or also like Semantic Error, or Sotus is like a mixture. Like it is, like Artit is kind of in that like in this compulsory heterosexuality mindset. But it's also not like as a big of a problem because everyone is like really accepting around them actually. Including the parents and the friends and the university. So yeah. And of course there's also like just sometimes just other factors, like I said, in Bad Buddy. And so that's why I love that about like so many Thai BLs. Or even in Why Are You, I think it's the sister who writes like BL fan fiction. And so it's just like really interesting because I like when it's like not really like the queerness is not what is 100% the antagonistic force, or not at all. For example, that's why I love My Love Mix-Up, because it's like such a cute story. As in, you know, as the name suggests, there is a little bit of a confusion basically, because the story goes like this, right? The one guy likes the one girl, but she likes someone else. And then she writes it on her eraser, because it's like a thing that if you use that eraser, then the person is also in love with you or something like that. And then her, like the person who has a crush on her, sees the eraser, but she already has erased part of the Japanese like letter basically of the name, so it reads as a different name. And then but then the person who it reads then picks up that, and then he doesn't want to out his friend / crush because he thinks she has a, you know, crush on that guy, but it's not. And then he basically confesses his feelings for that guy, which he doesn't have feelings for. And it's really interesting. In the end, they're like together because they like become friends, they fall in love, and it's like really cute. And so I feel like that also is the best. Also, Our Dining Table, I think it's also not really about the queerness. It's about other factors in the life, like, you know, generally not being really like being not very extroverted, being, you know, being very shy, being also slightly traumatized by your adoptive family, having other problems in life like grieving your mother and looking after your younger brother, right? And it's never really about the queerness. And I love that as well, you know, because there's so many other problems in life which can also impact you, you know? And so I think that that's really interesting, because sometimes I feel like as queer people, we feel very quite alienated by like a society, by media, because even though it's getting better, but, you know, and so I feel like that's why it's like giving this air of normalcy of this is like, you know, just like everyone else, basically. That's why I do kind of love that. Same kind of in Not Me, because like the stakes are so high, so it's never really about the queerness of the individual characters. It's just more of the queer collective as was shot, and also the protests are supposed to be about like that there's marriage equality in Thailand, which there is now in 2025 and beyond, which we love. And so yeah, that's why I feel like that's really interesting to also think about, is that basically queer people also deserve to have cheesy rom-com movies and series that they can just relax but still feel represented in. I already mentioned some iconic BL tropes and things that often appear in Thai BL or in GMMTV BLs. And so I wanted to talk about some more, because one of my favorite couple, if you don't know, if you have not watched this channel for very long, don't follow me on social media, which you should. It's under the same name as this channel, and you can also find all the links in my bio and on my profile. I'm a very big Perf Santa fan, as this is the fandom doll of Perf Santa. Isn't it cute? It's so cute. It sits here and listens as well. And one of their shows which brought them into fame. If you want to know more about them, I also have a whole video of how Perf Center came to be and all of the good stuff. They are roommates. Technically, first they're university students and they don't really have a lot to do with each other. But then, because the characters then are in the same university and they're all in the engineering faculty as well, I think. All of them are. And then because of circumstances in the show, they become roommates. And so it's like a lot of forced proximity. And I kind of love that, because it really like they had instant chemistry. But also I do love that. It's like a really cute trope. I also love the one where there's only one bed. But that does sometimes happen in BL, but not always. It happens more in fan fiction, I think. And so I have to say, like, perfect 10-liners, Perf Center as Yotagon in perfect 10-liners is just like the epitome for me as the roommate trope, because they're literally like, they don't really know each other. What I also love, another trope that I love, is accidental confessions. And we kind of have that again also in Bad Buddy, because especially Pran really does not want to confess his feelings. And so it's not accidental, I feel like, but it is kind of, because they're in this whole, like, they're really emotional. They're like basically in a fight, right? And it's like things happened before, like they're already really emotionally charged from their childhood, and also now at university where their friends groups are also like rivals / enemies. And so I think they didn't mean to confess on that moment on the rooftop, but the emotions just wanted to break free, especially when also Pat says, yeah, I don't really want to be your friend. I want to basically be more. Before that, he says, I was so lonely, because even though I didn't have to compete, which made me really happy, I also felt really like lonely, because you, the only person who understood this whole situation, and we had kind of built up this connection. And then, you know, so it's not really like, none of them are like thinking, oh, should I confess, should I not confess? That happens later, but this is technically an accidental confession. Then we have, of course, the drunk confessions are forgotten, which I don't know, like I get it and as a trope, but as a woman, that always confuses me. Because I'm like, I don't know if I want to forget something like that, because, you know, Anyway, so one of the ones where the person confesses something / has a kiss with the person, with the other man or ever person love interest, is in Kinport. They literally get I think in episode 3, they get really drunk, and especially Porsche completely forgets that they like kissed and stuff on the docks, and it's kind of funny but also kind of sad. So you know. Then of course we've got the magic towel, and someone gets sick from being in the rain so long, for example. We got the magic BL towel. Everything gets better after that. Then we've got, of course, like jealousy, like the classic trope. We've got the accidental touch that lingers too long. Like we have that a lot, right? Love by Chance is a really, really good example of that. They have a lot of accidental touches, / then also later even an accidental first kiss, which if you want to know more about my thoughts about that, watch my video about like first kisses in BL, where Love by Chance I'm mentioning and showing as well. It's like really cute. Also it's perfect. I think it was first BL role, I think. So love that. Yeah, what else do we have? Then of course height difference. I do love a good height difference moment, for example between Dean and Parm in Until We Meet Again, or also Woo Young and Jay. No, oh, I forgot his name. In Semantic Error, there's also this moment between the two characters, and he's like really tall already, but the other guy is even taller, so he like, yeah, there's still like a massive difference, even though he's like the smaller guy is like 10 to 15 centimeters taller than I am, and then the other guy is like 190 centimeters obviously, right, 190 centimeters I think. He's like really tall. Don't know what that is in like inches or feet or whatever the other people use. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I love that. Then yeah, we all talked about the one bed trope. It doesn't happen actually that often in actually doesn't happen that often in Thai BL, I have to say, but it should. But in Center Perfect 10-liners, there's like at one point they literally sleep in one bed only, and it's the funniest. Then I do love the cheesy sound effects in like We Are and in Perfect 10-liners, because it's like really fitting to the characters, like to the cuteness, to the funniness, but in like the really serious moments they don't really use the like those sound effects, so it's more like a, you know, a small background noise and soundtrack, but I still love that. Yeah. Yes, so I think I just think that like queer stories like should also have so many rom-coms, and I feel like Thai BL has really, and also some Japanese and Korean BLs have really already like established that you can do that so well. You have romantic escapism, you have queer joy without tragedy, you have those familiar comforting structures from your childhood, teenage years, you know, young adult years, but they're still like stories about queer people, but they're silly and soft and lovely and wholesome and adorable, and just have all the fun tropes, some of which became tropes within their own genre, which is Thai BL, but also in the whole world of BL and queer media, which I love that. And so I think that's why I really just want to share it. That's also kind of my mission on this channel, on my social media, is to spread queer joy, to let your inner fan go out, and to really connect all these queer media pieces into one, basically. Thank you, friends, for hanging out with me, my fangirl Chaos Corner. It was so lovely today to talk about rom-coms and Thai BLs. It was so amazing. I really had so much fun. I hope you had too. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. What are your favorite rom-coms, your favorite Thai BLs, your favorite tropes? Give me all of that good stuff. You can also message me on Instagram. You can like comment also on my TikTok videos if you want. Send me messages. Be like, this is what I want to see. And yeah, just let me know. I'm excited to hear your opinions, and I will see you soon. Bye!